It's Darkside Phil's Game of the Year Awards for 2015, the top 10 best games of the year. Well, ladies and gents, it's time to set the stage for who's going to be my top pick for Game of the Year 2015. 3 games this year really stood out, and what I'd like to do is outline all 3 of them one by one to let you know why I feel they're a valid contender for the best game of 2015. So let's get started. First up is Fallout 4. I don't think this one's going to be any surprise for anyone, knowing how big of a fan of the Fallout series I am and how much enjoyment I got out of my Fallout 4 playthrough. Let's talk about the improvements. How about the fact that the graphics were dramatically improved? The fact that the first-person shooter combat outside of VATS was dramatically improved. The narrative. The fact that there's more followers than ever before in a Fallout game. The fact that there's more factions than ever before that you can actually choose to be a part of and or betray at any point during the course of the story until one of the factions finally just wants to kill you. How about the fact that there's a ton of settlements? A new element where you recruit settlements and have people join your cause. You can have resources distributed and passed between camps. You can then use those resources in a brand new crafting system that allows you to customize your armor and weapons in a whole new way than ever before. I mean, there were ridiculous amounts of improvements in Fallout 4. Sadly, though, I think that a lot of people look past those improvements because for whatever reason, they just think that Fallout 4 was overhyped and they don't want to admit that it's a valid Game of the Year candidate. Listen, I am more than willing to admit that Fallout 4 has shortcomings. Why is the frame rate still so choppy in certain parts? Why is it still so buggy in certain parts? There's a lot of things that I felt were opportunities for improvement in Fallout 4 that Bethesda kind of waved their shoulders up and said, well, it worked in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, so why fix it for here? We'll just add a ton of new stuff and kind of ignore a lot of the issues that were with the previous 2 games, and that's unfortunate. I mean, just some of the loading times are unbearable in 2015, but I digress. Fallout 4 has so much content that it took me over 2 months to get through it, and I know I still missed out on certain things even using the strategy guide. It's that much of an immersive game, an immersive universe, and I really enjoyed it. So I think it's a no-brainer, it's a shoo-in, it's definitely in my top 3, and a candidate for Game of the Year. Our next candidate for Game of the Year is Bloodborne. That's right, the new series from Software, the original creators of the Dark Souls series, that took the games out of kind of the fantasy genre and more into a more gothic, dystopian, modern era. Having these kind of elements from different authors of horror and thriller kind of implemented into it just really added to the story, added to the plot line. The fact that there were ranged weapons for the very first time, the fact that there really is no defensive blocking in the game, but instead making it more action-based with dodges and countering with parries with your weapons and guns, really made the game a little bit different and a lot more refreshing than this tried-and-true Dark Souls formula over and over and over. And just the psychological horror of the game, once you start playing it and you realize that there's things going on behind the scenes that you're not aware of that are then later revealed in big reveals, the fact that the game has a ridiculous amount of content in it for this kind of game, for an open world wandering action game with RPG elements, these games really have tons of content, and From Software does a great job. The wide variety of bosses, the incredibly challenging secret bosses, a totally optional but really awesome additional challenge dungeon after you've beaten the game. I mean, how much more could you ask for from this style of game? Were there a few shortcomings? Of course there were. This game had a few bugs in it. I do feel that there were a few points in the game where the difficulty spike was too difficult, or that the game was pretty cryptic to the point where maybe you have to know what to do in order to do a few of the things in the game, and I'm very happy that people did tell me about the stuff that I was missing out on so that I could do it. But those can easily be forgiven when you look at the wide breadth of what Bloodborne was. And I actually hope that they eventually do a sequel because it was that awesome of a game. So Bloodborne, absolutely in the contention for Game of the Year, one of my favorite games and playthroughs of 2015, undoubtedly. Last but certainly not least in the 3 games being considered for my Game of the Year of 2015 is The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt. Boy, did I have a lot of fun returning to the world of Geralt and the Witchers and all the magic and lore and fantasy that is incorporated in this awesome series from CD Projekt Red. And let me tell you, did I do a much better job this time around than the flubbing of The Witcher 2 many years ago. I'm glad that I took the time to sit down and learn exactly how to play it rather than trying to rush through it, and in particular the fact that I became so immersed in the massive amount of side content in this game. I mean, there's so much content. Everywhere you go, anyone you talk to, you're going to unlock some kind of a side quest line. And unlike other open world RPGs, it needs to be brought up that the side content of The Witcher 3 is not all just repetitive fetch quests or grinding here and there, kills certain number of enemies. No, and not to say that that doesn't exist in the game, because it absolutely does. But between the monster hunts, between the random encounters from characters of previous series in the Witcher series, and all the amount of fun stuff that's just implemented, the side mini-games, there's so much to do in The Witcher 3 that you're actually doing yourself a massive disservice if you're just rushing through the story. But even then, you're probably going to get a ton of hours of gameplay out of the game. One of the most content-heavy RPGs I feel that I've ever played when it comes to content that's not super repetitive. In fact, the only real negatives that I can say about the game is, number one, I don't feel the combat has advanced at all since The Witcher 2. It's the same exact system, and in this day and age, it needed to be advanced and made a little bit more modern, much like the combat of Bloodborne and Fallout 4 had been improved. This game didn't have that. It was kind of more of the same, and it was a little frustrating to not have more modernized combat. And number two, the fact that I played this on console, and the PlayStation 4 version had tons of bugs and glitches to the point where I repeatedly joked the game should have been called The Glitcher 3 because of it. But forgiving those things, this game was such an immersive playthrough. I played it for over 2 months, loved every moment of it, even though most people fell off from watching because it was so long. I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that people enjoyed it as well, and that many people are saying that this is their Game of the Year pick. It certainly is in my contention for that dignity. Alright, the stage has been set for an amazing triple threat battle. When we come back, one of these three games will be eliminated from contention for my Game of the Year awards, and I'll tell you why. Will it be Fallout 4 with its sci-fi, post-apocalyptic kind of vibe? Will it be Bloodborne with its really dark, gothic horror? Or will it be The Witcher 3 with its fantasy setting and open-world awesomeness? You'll find out when we come back next, and we say who's the number 3 pick for my Game of the Year countdown. Don't miss it.